Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The US has conducted an airstrike against the Taliban in Afghanistan's southern Helmand province. The strike is the first such attack since a troop withdrawal agreement was signed between the two sides on Saturday. The US military said it was a defensive strike to disrupt Taliban attacks on checkpoints, which had killed 20 Afghan security personnel. A US forces spokesman in Afghanistan, Colonel Sonny Leggett, said the fighters were actively attacking an Afghan forces checkpoint in the region. The spokesperson said Washington is committed to peace but will defend Afghan forces if needed. He said the US calls on the Taliban to stop needless attacks and uphold their commitments under the agreement. After speaking to Taliban chief negotiator Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar over the phone, US President Donald Trump said the group has agreed to cease violence in the region. The telephonic conversation came 3 days after the US and the Taliban signed a peace agreement in Doha. The Taliban spokesperson said the group's chief negotiator Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar and Trump spoke for 35 minutes. Zabiullah said Baradar called on Trump to not allow anyone to violate terms of agreement. He said Trump told Baradar he will soon have US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo speak to Ghani to remove hurdles in intra-Afghan talks. Trump told reporters he had a very good conversation with Mullah Baradar.
We don't want violence. We'll see what happens. They're dealing with Afghanistan, but we'll see what happens.
Okay? Do you believe this is a pandemic, sir? Is this a
We had actually a very good talk with the leader of the Taliban. Yeah.
In a related development, Afghanistan's presidential palace says Qatar has offered its assistance to facilitate intra-Afghan talks. In a statement, the palace said Amir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani called Afghan President Ashraf Ghani to discuss a Doha deal. It said during the phone call, the two leaders discussed the implementation of the US-Taliban agreement and intra-Afghan talks. The palace said Al Thani said both Kabul and Taliban have to sort out their differences to form an inclusive government. It said Ghani thanked Sheikh Tamim and asserted he is open to further discussions about peace. For more on this, we are joined by Rahimullah Yusufzai, an Afghan expert from Peshawar, Pakistan. Thank you for your time. Despite the US President Donald Trump's call to Taliban leaders in order to achieve peace in Afghanistan after the Doha deal, the US has hit the Taliban fighters in Helmand. Do you think this strike can actually disrupt intra-Afghan talks?
I don't think this is going to disrupt the peace agreement or the proposed intra-Afghan dialogue. I think it has raised concerns whether this reduction in violence understanding can be sustained because the Taliban yesterday, when they resumed attacks against the Afghan government forces, had also announced that they would not attack the US and its allied forces. But now the US has carried out the airstrike against Taliban fighters in Helmand. That actually can provoke the Taliban to maybe also start attacking the US-led NATO forces. That could create problems. But I believe the US also had to take some action to reassure the Afghan government that it is standing by it. It will not abandon it because Taliban had carried out a number of attacks against the Afghan forces and killed about 20 soldiers and policemen. So the US had to act. But we still don't know how many Taliban fighters have been killed in this US airstrike, whether it was symbolic or whether it was really a very big attack causing casualties among Taliban.
Both President Ghani and Abdullah have claimed victory in the presidential election. What political formula could find a way through the complexity of this situation, and how do you see President Ghani's future?
I think that is a big problem now, and it has to be resolved as soon as possible because Ashraf Ghani is going to take oath for his second term in office on March 9th and on March 7th, I believe. So if it happens, he takes oath, then Abdullah also has threatened to hold a separate swearing-in ceremony and take oath as the president of a parallel administration, and that, will create two parallel administrations in Kabul. Then Taliban will say, who represents whom, who is going to talk on behalf of the anti-Taliban forces. So there has to be some sort of an understanding. At least, even if they don't accept each other's victory, they can agree on forming a joint inclusive delegation to talk to Taliban.
Mr. Yousufi, what could happen if the intra-Afghan talks are unable to achieve consensus?
I think starting the talks is going to be a challenge. They're supposed to begin on March 10th, and by that time, the prisoners' exchange should have taken place. It's not happening yet, although we have heard reports that some of the Taliban prisoners, have been removed from their cells and their biometrics have taken place. So maybe they are preparing to release them. Also, the Taliban have agreed to meet an Afghan government delegation for the first time in Qatar to discuss the issue of prisoners. So these are hopeful signs, and I think that this could lead to the talks, but that will have to be postponed beyond March 10 because the process of releasing the prisoners must start by that time. But to make the talks a success, that will be a big challenge because this is not going to be easy.
That was Rahimullah Yusuf, the Afghan expert from Peshawar, Pakistan. Thank you for your time. Now, moving on, European Union Ambassador Andrula Kaminara has lauded Pakistan's strong commitment regarding the Financial Action Task Force Action Plan. Kaminara was calling on Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said both discussed trade and political relations between Pakistan and the EU. The ministry said Kaminara offered technical facilitation to Pakistan regarding the action plan. The Foreign Ministry said Qureshi highlighted grave human rights violations by Indian forces in occupied Kashmir. It said Qureshi informed Kaminara about the Indian government's controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. A 6-member delegation of Organization of Islamic Cooperation is visiting Azad Jammu and Kashmir today. The visit comes amid 212 days long curfew and communications blackout imposed by India in occupied Kashmir. The delegation led by OIC Special Envoy on Kashmir, Yusuf M. Al-Doibi, will also visit line of control to assess the situation. During the visit, the envoy will get first-hand knowledge about the loss of lives and property caused by indiscriminate fighting of Indian forces. The delegation will also be briefed on the deteriorating human rights situation in the occupied valley. Earlier, Dubey met Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, and the Kashmir issue is an internationally recognized dispute. In his meeting with the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the envoy said OIC is focused on peaceful resolution of the issue. In India, Delhi Minorities Commission says the riots in the capital were well planned and one-sided to target the Muslims. The Commission's chairman, Zafarullah Islam Khan, visited the violence-hit areas of New Delhi. Speaking to media, Khan said around 2,000 outsiders were brought to Northeast Delhi under a planned conspiracy. He said most of these people stayed in schools before attacking the neighborhoods. He said the Commission found extensive damage to Muslim houses, shops and workshops. Khan said Delhi police presence was minimal during the first 2 days when most of the violence took place. Meanwhile, the Muslim community is still trying to recover after 3 days of violent pogroms that killed over 40 people last week. One Muslim couple has spent nearly a week outside a local morgue waiting to identify the body of the woman's father. More in this report.
Gulshan Nasiruddin's father disappeared last week when mobs of Hindu fanatics launched an assault on Muslims and their neighborhoods. All she's found of him is a single leg that she's been waiting for doctors to identify for a week. The only person she's had with her is her nearly blind husband.
My father's whole body was burnt and only one leg was recovered. So right now, the doctors are saying, how do we believe that it was your father? You can't recognize anything through just one leg. That's why, the day before yesterday, they took a sample for the DNA test, and only after the test, they will be able to establish something definitive.
The impoverished family has now lost its only breadwinner as a result of unfettered Hindu extremism. Such stories have sent a shockwave of fear throughout India, where Muslims say they no longer feel safe.
Whatever happened was wrong, and it should not have happened. Those people should get reformed, and there should be peace all around. It should not be like this, where we are all living a life of fear.
Many Muslim families have left their homes, leaving for cities with less religious tensions. Meanwhile, schools and businesses remain shut in New Delhi.
Due to the shutting down of shops, the businesses are closed, people have suffered losses, the children are not going to schools, and there are problems at people's homes, like milk or bread, so many people have problems.
This is not an isolated incident. Signs of rising Hindu-Muslim tensions have been growing since Prime Minister Narendra Modi took office in 2014. These include cow lynchings and hate-laden speeches by members of the ruling BJP and the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. As such, India's so-called secular image now lies in tatters, along with the lives of thousands of its Muslim citizens.
The United Nations has appealed for nearly $900 million to help thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. The UN Refugee Agency and International Organization for Migration have launched a joint appeal for the cause. The UN said the money will address the needs of approximately 855,000 Rohingya refugees. The international bodies said the funds will also help over 444,000 vulnerable Bangladeshis in the communities hosting Rohingya refugees. It's the funds will cover food, shelter, sanitation, healthcare, education and protection services. Over 740,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled to neighboring Bangladesh after Myanmar military launched a massacre in 2017. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Turkey says 2 of its soldiers have been killed and 6 wounded in an attack by Syrian government forces in Syria's Idlib province. The defense ministry said Turkish troops retaliated by striking Syrian military targets. Fighting in the northwestern Idlib province continues on the eve of talks between presidents of Turkey and Russia. Earlier, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he expects his talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin will result in a ceasefire in Idlib. Erdogan was speaking to reporters ahead of his visit to Moscow on Thursday. At least 59 Turkish soldiers have been killed in Idlib since Turkey began its military campaign in Syria. The clashes have forced nearly 1 million people to flee towards the Turkish border in search of safety. On Sunday, Turkey officially declared the start of a full-scale military operation against Syrian regime forces. Turkey says 9 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party have been killed in an airstrike during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. The defense ministry said the military carried out operations backed by air power in Avasin and Kirkuk regions. The ministry said that Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said in the last 5 months, Turkey has killed over 400 Kurdish militants in northern Iraq. Ankara holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in 30-year terror campaign. Amnesty International says Greece has been violating EU and international laws and putting human lives at risk and by its measures to block the entry of migrants. In a statement, the rights group said people seeking asylum are once again being used as bargaining chips in a callous political game. Amnesty said Athens must refrain from using excessive force and those seeking asylum in Greece should not be treated as criminals. Meanwhile, the EU Commission said Greece is Europe's shield against illegal migrants. The Commission has pledged $780 million in financial aid for controlling migrants. Over 130,000 migrants have crossed to Europe after Turkey opened its borders while accusing the EU of not fulfilling the promises it made. In the United States, voters have gone to the polls in 14 U.S. states on Super Tuesday, the largest voting day in the Democratic presidential race. Former Vice President Joe Biden is projected to win 9 out of 14 states, while early frontrunner Bernie Sanders has captured 3. More in this report.
Super Tuesday is the most consequential day of voting in the Democratic presidential primary race. Ahead of the vote, Joe Biden picked up endorsements from ex-mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Amy Klobuchar, who have both dropped out. Biden is set to win in Minnesota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. Exit polls suggest Biden has won large majorities of African American voters, a crucial bloc in the Democratic Party.
We're still waiting for Texas and California, a few other small states to come in. But it's looking good. So I'm here to report we are very much alive. And make no mistake about it, this campaign will send Donald Trump packing.
Despite Senator Sanders' loss to Biden in South Carolina, he still remained the frontrunner heading into Super Tuesday. Sanders is expected to win in Colorado, Utah, and his home state, Vermont.
We're doing well in Texas right now. We won Colorado. And I'm cautiously optimistic that later in the evening we can win the largest state in this country, the state of California.
The next primary contests are scheduled for March 10th in Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington state. A candidate requires more than 2/3 of the delegates to secure the nomination at the party's convention in July.
Italy's Civil Protection Agency has reported the deaths of another 27 people in the last 24 hours from the new coronavirus. The country's death toll is now at 79, the highest in the world outside China, with 38 new deaths, brought its total toll to nearly 3,000. More in this report.
Up to now, 3,200 people from around the world have lost their lives because of the virus, which has further infected over 93,000 people in 70 countries. While the growth of the number of cases in the epicenter, China, has slowed, in Europe and the US, the number of infections has only grown. In Iran, another 11 people have died from the infection, taking their total to 77. South Korea has reported another 516 new coronavirus cases, bringing the country's total to over 5,000, with 32 deaths.
There are about 2,300 confirmed patients in Daegu who are awaiting hospital or treatment center admission. The government is deploying all possible resources across the government to increase the number of treatment centers for patients in Daegu who are waiting in their homes.
UK health officials have warned the new coronavirus has the potential to infect 80% of the British population. In the meantime, the number of deaths in the US has risen to 9, while the authorities have reported over 100 confirmed cases.
We've already made a decision on parts of Italy, and Japan is very unfortunate because I've seen the incredible job they did on the Olympics.
The World Bank has committed $12 billion in aid for developing countries grappling with the spread of the disease.
The WHO says there haven't been any new reported Ebola cases in DR Congo for 2 weeks. Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says this is a positive sign for the whole world. Ghebreyesus' comments come a day after the last Ebola patient in DRC was discharged. First detected in August 2018, the outbreak was concentrated in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. 2,200 Ebola reported deaths and 3,300 cases of infection have been reported since then. Progress in fighting the disease was also hindered by militancy in the region. This epidemic was preceded by another smaller outbreak in another part of the country. This is DRC's 10th Ebola outbreak since 1976. Hong Kongers are escaping the coronavirus anxiety by heading for the hills to find fresh air and space to exercise. Details in this report.
While the financial hub is known for soaring skyscrapers and cramped housing blocks, its steep mountains and remote hiking trails offer welcome relief from the COVID-19 fears, which triggered the closure of public facilities. Over the past weekends, long snaking lines of people have been seen on popular trails like Lion Rock and Dragon's Back.
I've been staying at home for too long. Going out hiking, I think everyone shares the same thought, that it is to breathe some fresh air, make ourselves comfortable, enjoy the breeze and the view, and to change feelings for the better.
However, the sudden increase of walkers has left a trail of rubbish behind, including surgical masks and hand wipes. Environmental group Greenpeace is urging people to hike without a trace.
I wore face mask and alcohol hand rub when I left home. When I started hiking, as this trail is quite steep, my breathing becomes more difficult, so I took the mask off.
Some 101 patients have tested positive for the virus in Hong Kong, 2 of whom have died.
The US Federal Reserve has cut its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to shield its economy from the impact of new coronavirus. In a statement, the Federal Reserve says the virus poses an evolving risk to economic activity. The Fed has lowered the federal funds rate to a range between 1% and 1.25%, the deepest one-off cut since the 2008 financial crisis. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said the magnitude of overall effects on the economy remains highly uncertain and the situation remains fluid. Powell said the coronavirus will weigh on the US economy, but the central bank's action will provide a meaningful boost.
We do recognize that a rate cut will not reduce the rate of infection. It won't fix a broken supply chain. We get that. We don't think we have all the answers. But we do believe that our action will provide a meaningful boost to the economy. More specifically, it will support accommodative financial conditions and avoid a tightening of financial conditions, which can weigh on activity.
European markets are trading higher, with investors' confidence surging on the expected global stimulus measures pledged by central banks. London's FTSE 100 is trading 0.75% higher, despite major stocks shedding value. Frankfurt's DAX has gained 0.75%. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading fractionally higher. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi gained over 2%. The Shanghai Composite also gained ground. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices pared early gains, losing a fraction over fears of global recession. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.